Hello everyone and welcome to Build Fix, episode 16 for June 2025. This is my monthly series where I help people choose parts for their gaming PCs or help people choose perhaps different parts than they've initially chosen, trying to get the best bang for the buck. The series is proudly sponsored by PCPartPicker, which I'll be using to go over the builds today. And I have two builds, but they're largely representative of most of the build requests that I got this month.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. Okay, so Build Fix starts with a community poll, which I usually post the day before I shoot the video. Here's the post for June. I also included a poll. I tried to do like summer activities, right? So apparently going camping was the winner for summertime activities with 38% of the votes. A good choice. I'm gonna be going camping next month. We also had the beach coming in second with 23%. This is like road trip, I guess, with 21%. And then I guess fewer people chilling in the desert this summer, which makes some sense since it's hot. Anyway, from the answers down here, I have picked two builds to go over. I want to say thank you to everyone who submitted the builds, but again, I felt like most of the builds for this month fell into two categories. One was the higher end system based on a 9800X3D, which is the best CPU you can get for PC gaming right now. What other parts are suitable to build a 9800X3D based system with, especially if you're choosing a graphics card? And then the second half was AM4 builds, which is AMD's last generation platform, which is still going strong. It has had a long life, but there are still some viable options there, whether you're looking to build a budget system or if you've been running AM4 for a while and are looking for an upgrade from something that was built maybe 3 or 4 years ago. All right, so our first build comes from Edge_GTO999. Hi, Mr. Paul. Hello. Getting straight into the build, we of course have a 9800X3D, so we're starting with the high end. We have a 5070 Ti Vanguard SoC graphics card from MSI, two 1TB Samsung 990 EVO Plus SSDs, a 32 gig memory kit, 1000 watt power supply, a B850-E gaming Wi-Fi motherboard, 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler from Arctic, an Antec Flux Pro case that includes 6 fans. I always like to check the monitor for a gaming PC specifically because the resolution and refresh rate can have a big impact on what GPU you choose. And then we also have some peripherals down here, an EpoMaker gaming keyboard, a HyperX Cloud 3 gaming headset, a HyperX Pulsefire Haste 2 gaming mouse, and then a couple Thermal Grizzly products for CPU mounting and cooling. So looking at about a $3,300 spend here, targeting $3,100 to $3,200, mostly for gaming, some networking stuff. I'm not sure what that exactly means, but building at the end of the summer. And again, the big gaming push here is going to be keeping up with that 1440p 360Hz monitor. So jumping over to PCPartPicker, I have populated a build list with most of the parts as far as I could tell. Right at the top we got the 9800X3D, which is going for about its MSRP, around $472 at pretty much all the retailers. But if I scroll down here to the price, we're at $3,250, we'll call it. We'll round up a little bit. I did add the Thermal Grizzly contact frame, as well as a monitor, but I have left out the peripherals just for the sake of simplicity. Now for a high-end build like this, where you're spending upwards of $3,000, and granted that is including the monitor as well, which is $730 right now, but my question always is, for your core components, the ones that most impact your performance, which is going to be the CPU, and then a little bit more heavily the GPU, can you claw your way up to the next level of that particular product by saving yourself some money elsewhere? Now right at the top for the CPU, there's really nowhere to go. The 9800X3D is going to get you the best gaming performance pretty much hands down. You could potentially look at the 9950X3D, which is the 16 core, but that would be like an additional $250 to $300. And that's not really going to affect or help out your gaming performance. It would help in other areas, like if you're building a multi-use system for video editing or something like that. So the next thing I would look at would be the graphics card. Right now we're looking at the MSI Vanguard SoC RTX 5070 Ti. Now because the higher end NVIDIA graphics cards, the RTX 5070 Ti, 5080, and 5090 are still seeing a price premium, a pretty significant markup over what the MSRP should be. These cards are selling for, I think, a lot more than they should. MSRP is supposed to be $750, this one's going for well over $200 more. And that's partially because this is an MSI Vanguard card. These are the newly designed cards that they just launched along with the 50 series, so they're still a little bit harder to come by. But because that was the card that you had chosen, I added it to the parts list, and even though it's out of stock, at $970, I'm not sure if you're going to have an easy time actually locating one of these cards. Remember that an aftermarket card or a card with a manufacturer overclock is rarely going to get you a significant increase in performance, and you can often buy the base level cards and just overclock them a little bit yourself and get pretty much the same result. So I would at least take a look at lower priced 5070 Ti's that are out there. They can be found for around $800. Granted, these are Newegg open box 5070 Ti's, so that may or may not be something that is desirable for you. Sometimes open box cards can be a pretty good deal, but sometimes they can also be like kind of on the used side of things. I'm just trying to find like the cheapest 5070 Ti on Newegg that's not open box, which is apparently $900 for this MSI Ventus right here, which is still tough to swallow. I would totally opt for one of these open box $800 cards over one of those. So final advice for the graphics card would be either to find a cheaper 5070 Ti if you can locate one, or see if you can claw your way up to an RTX 5080. If the RTX 5080 was its MSRP, which is supposed to be $1,000, that would be an easy upsell over a $900 to $950-ish 5070 Ti. However, the $1,000 5080s are still nowhere to be found. The cheapest one listed on PCPartPicker is $1,265. So that may or may not be something you can afford if you're going for all-out best gaming performance you can get within your price range. But really, I'm just trying to go over this parts list somewhat methodically in the way that I would do it. So since we've established that there's really not another CPU that you might want to upgrade to, and your graphics card is also somewhat locked in beyond spending an additional $300 to $400, so the next thing I would do would just be to look over this list to see if there's any money being spent somewhere where I think you're not getting a lot of value out of it, so we can try to bring this total price down a little bit. Now with all respect to Bauer, the AM5 contact frame is a little bit of a luxury item. It's not really necessary. I have never used an AM5 contact frame, and as long as you're careful with the application and threading of your thermal paste, it's not going to make much of an impact. So we're going to shave off $23 by removing that. Likewise, the Cryonaut Thermal Grizzly paste is nice. It might give you like a 1 or 2 degree performance difference, but realistically, your Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 is going to come with thermal paste itself. We can just use that and save ourselves another $8 or so. Now the CPU cooler is what I would typically look at next, and if you've watched this series before, you've probably heard me many times be like, hey guys, you don't need to spend $100 plus on a liquid cooler. There are lots of really good air cooling options available for like $35 to $50, and it doesn't have that additional point of failure that an all-in-one liquid cooler introduces. No, not leaks. Everyone's like, liquid cooler, maybe it will leak and short out your system. Leaks are actually an extreme rarity with all-in-one liquid coolers, but the pump failing is something that has happened to me like 3 different times, and if the pump fails, your CPU overheats, and if it does that during a system startup, it can corrupt your operating system and it can cause some problems that just don't exist with an air cooler. With all that said, liquid cooling is more efficient and it will keep your CPU running cooler versus an air cooler. So if you are going to go for an AIO, which is one of the only ways to sort of upgrade a 9800X3D, this is the right choice. Arctic makes really good liquid coolers. They sell for typically below $100 even for a 360mm one. So I am actually okay with this choice and I'm going to leave it as is. That said, you could shave another $40 or $45 or so off of this build by going with a Thermalright Phantom Spirit, for example. Now the motherboard, I am going to swap out. We're looking at $350 for a motherboard, which is on the pricier side for a board. Granted, it's an Asus ROG Strix, but there's also the budget chipset, B850-E. The chipset variations, especially if you're just looking at the 800 series, are pretty simple to figure out. X870E has a double chipset, which gives you a lot more connectivity. B850 and X870 without the E have a single chipset. So if you want a higher end motherboard with more native connectivity, go for X870E, or you can keep an eye out for X670 or X670E deals, because those both also have dual chipsets. Or if you're going to go for a B850 motherboard, you shouldn't need to spend more than about $200 or so. So we're going to drop that motherboard. We're going to choose another motherboard. We have the compatibility filter on up here, so it's only going to show us motherboards that are compatible with our 9800X3D processor, which is socket AM5 boards. So first off, if we're opting for high end, let's look at X870E motherboards over here. We shall sort by price, and we can see that there is an X870E-P Wi-Fi from MSI. So this is about $80 cheaper than that B850 motherboard. It still has Wi-Fi 7. Once you've made sure you have a socket that's compatible with the rest of your system, with motherboards you should look at like other connectivity. So I would probably be perusing all these motherboards in like the $200 to $350-ish range as potential alternatives for that B850 motherboard, because these are going to give you more connectivity. And really, unless you're going for high-end overclocking, which most people don't do these days, connectivity is what your motherboard choice is all about. Now, if you wanted to save some money and probably still get yourself most of the gaming and CPU performance that you would have had otherwise, then I'd say look at your B850 motherboard options. You can also look at B650 in this price range, because here you're going to have choices down in the like $150 to $200 range. Since we're working with an ATX case, I would probably choose an ATX size motherboard as well. Here's also where you might try to locate some deals for motherboards that might have like a promo code offer or something like that. So here's an MSI B850 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi. It's got Wi-Fi 7. It's usually $225, marked down to $170 with that promo code. So for the sake of seeing how much money we can save, let's go ahead and drop that in. I'm also going to change the graphics card from the 5070 Ti MSI Vanguard to just the lowest priced 5070 Ti that's available. We'll add from filter for that. It's currently $840. And then the final component I would critique here would be the SSD. We have two 1TB SSDs, and I'm not sure why you went with two different drives. It is nice to have two drives, so you can have one drive like for your operating system, for example, and then a second drive for storage. It makes it a little bit easier to swap things around. These are both PCIe 5.0 drives though, and Samsung's drives, while they are quite nice and definitely among the best in terms of performance, they also command quite a bit of a premium. Now I'm gonna just drop one of these. So we'll leave you with, like, let's say this would be a good operating system drive, and maybe for games that you use pretty frequently to have that Gen 5 SSD. And then I use some filters up here to look for 2TB SSDs that are M.2 2280 form factor. We can sort that by price or by price per gigabyte to see the cheapest available there. So 2TB SSDs are around $90 at the cheapest. These drives are not going to be quite as fast as like that Gen 5 Samsung drive, but they're going to be a lot cheaper in terms of price per gigabyte, so it's going to give you a lot more storage for games, for example. So there we go. In terms of parts I would swap out or consider swapping out, I think I've covered pretty much all of them from this build. Everything else I think is essentially good to go. You probably save a little bit of money on the power supply as well. That's $200. It's a good Corsair unit. But all right, the last thing I would consider possibly upgrading, and this is again only if you're doing, I'd say, more stuff beyond just gaming with your system. If you're going to be gaming and streaming, or gaming and game capturing at the same time, or if you're going to do anything more heavy lifting like video editing, for example, you might want to upgrade from a 32GB memory kit or a 2x16GB kit to a 2x32GB kit, and you can find those for roughly double the price of your 32GB option. But with our changes, we've gone from about $3,250 down to $2,922. It's like well over $300 in savings. And honestly, in terms of game performance and everything, you would notice no difference going with this parts list versus the other one that we started with. All right, so hopefully anyone who's looking at a higher end system, something to pair with a 9800X 3D, that would be my thought process going down the list in terms of what things you should keep, what things are worth spending more money on, and where you can save a few bucks. Our next build fix comes from MechPlatoon though, who's asking what to upgrade, or should they even upgrade their mini PC, which is built in a Dan A4 SFX case. Going with the 1440p 144Hz Acer monitor, currently rocking a very good budget CPU, the 5600X, which has been a mainstay for quite some time. I've done quite a few builds with that chip. We've also got a Gigabyte V550i Aorus Pro AX motherboard, Noctua NH-L9A cooler, 32GB DDR4 3200 memory kit, 2TB NVMe SSD, RTX 3070 Founders Edition, which is a good card, but probably something that could do with an upgrade. And then a Silverstone SFX L 850W Platinum power supply, which is good because 850 watts means we've got range for upgrading that GPU without necessarily needing to swap out the power supply, which if you've built in a mini ATX case before can be quite a pain in the butt. So here are the components for MechPlatoon's build as closely as I could locate them. Price is $1,215, but do note that the graphics card price is not included because no pricing is available for that card because it's not really available for sale at the retailers that PCPartPicker works with. We'll go ahead and edit this list though. Note the compatibility warning at the top is telling us that the motherboard we have chosen is only going to be compatible with the CPU we've chosen with a specific BIOS update. This is pretty handy to know if you're buying specifically a newer CPU and an older motherboard, but most motherboards have something called USB BIOS flashback that lets you update the BIOS now without having a CPU installed, so you can work around this compatibility issue which is why it's in orange and not in red. Now for the case, I swapped in this Lian Li A4H20. PCPartPicker actually does list Dan cases, but they don't have retail options available for them. So while you can choose them and add them to the build, you would need to manually add in the price. But the good news is that Dan collaborated with Lian Li for this version of the A4 case. And I actually did a build in the white version and actually upgraded it to the wood paneling version 2 recently. And that is currently up and running as our HTPC. I'll post a link to this video in the description if you guys want to check it out. This one's also often been for sale for a pretty reasonable price. The only one currently listed here is $155, which is a little bit on the high side. But okay, let's approach fixing this build in a couple different ways. First of all, for anyone building a mini ITX system, mini ITX is nice because it's small, portable, pick it up and move it around. Mini ITX can be a little bit more challenging to upgrade because you have fewer parts that are compatible with Mini ITX, so you have a more limited selection of upgrade components to choose from. And then also compared to full-size ATX builds, Mini ITX systems can often just be a little bit more difficult to get in to remove and replace things, like if you have everything wired up very specifically. That said, for MechPlatoon and anyone who has a AM4 system with similar specs to these, there are some very nice upgrades that you can drop in. And the first one, of course, is going to be the CPU. The 5600X is quite nice, but it is a 6-core, and we do have higher core count options available on the AM4 platform, and it does not have 3D V-cache, which is additional CPU cache AMD has been adding to their CPUs, both with AM4 with the 5000 series and the more recent 7000 and 9000 series, and adding that cache has proven to be a big help for gaming performances specifically. Now the only thing I'm slightly worried about is that on the AM4 platform, those X3D chips have been a little bit harder to find. The 5800X 3D was the first one that came out. You can actually see there's not even a price history for this because they've been sold out for so long. Look, if we go back a year, we can see them popping up a little bit, but really since September, October of last year, the 5800X 3D has not been a viable choice. Instead, there is the 5700X 3D, which is really just a slightly downclocked version of the 5800X 3D. And this is available directly on Amazon, although it's apparently being shipped and sold by Amazon Germany, so it might take a little bit longer to get to you. Still, it's there and it's available, so whether you're looking at the 5800X 3D or the 5700X 3D in stock, available at retail, or you're looking for used deals, this would be the chip that I would want to upgrade to if you were planning to also upgrade your GPU, because your GPU balance between a 3070 and the 5600X is actually pretty good. Those two parts are pretty well balanced. If you're going to be upgrading the GPU though and sticking with the 5600X, you're going to be leaving some of the GPU performance on the table, depending of course on the game that you're playing and settings and everything. But with that 5700X 3D dropped in, then I think we could totally upgrade your graphics card as well. And the nice thing here is that you have quite a few options to choose from, and there's actually quite a few GPUs that are also available at MSRP that would be a nice upgrade from your 3070. So I'm going to put direct links in the video's description to the GPUs that are the best, and I put best, air quotes, very important around best right now because a lot of these are just MSRP, or some of them are even still over. And not all of these are good upgrades from a 3070. I'm just going down my list. So if you want to support Intel's Arc program, the Arc B580 is $300 at its cheapest right now. This is supposed to be a $250 card. I'm only mentioning this because it's on my list below, not because it's a good upgrade from a 3070. The 9060 XT you can find for not quite MSRP. It's about $370 at the cheapest. And that is for the 16 gigabyte variant of this card. I would only recommend going for the 16 gig variant of this card. But again, also not a good upgrade from a 3070. We'll get there though, we'll get there soon. All right, the RX 9070 16 gig card. So you're gonna get both a VRAM upgrade, you're gonna get a performance upgrade. This is an AMD Radeon card, so depending on your current feelings and opinions about NVIDIA, it's a good way to maybe say, ha, NVIDIA, I didn't go with you for an upgrade this time. That said, this card should be $550 and not $600, so that's also a little bit of a markup. But yes, this could be something that you could drop in for that 3070. The 9070 XT 16 gig is a nice bump up in performance over the 9070 non-XT 16 gig, but it's also $100 more expensive, and at $700 this becomes a little bit more difficult to recommend. The prices for the 9070s have been coming down, so I would say don't buy at this price right now. Just do note what the lowest current price is for it for the time being. If you want the direct NVIDIA upgrade path, the 5070 would be your 2 generations newer variant of the 3070. And again, the somewhat good news about this is that it can be purchased for $550, which is the MSRP. So at least you're not paying a markup there. I would really appreciate it if this card had more than 12 gigs of VRAM. And that is one of the comparison notes between this card and the 9070s, for example. 5070 Ti and 5080 still kind of reaching up into that halo range for NVIDIA, which is why these are still overpriced. This one was only $75 over its MSRP, but it's out of stock now. Here is the second best option for the 5070 Ti in terms of pricing, which is 15 bucks more at $840. So with all these things taken into consideration and not wanting to pay over MSRP and such, I'd say the RTX 5070 would be a nice sweet spot in there. And look, there's even more of them available for $550 now. Look, even directly on Newegg, but like they can't just sell it for that much. They have to give you a $150 promo code because that's how that works. Whatever, I guess we'll take what we can get. At least it's still $550, or go with one of these other ones that is also $550. All of these have crazy promo codes. $110 promo code, $100 promo code, and the PNY is only in stock at Best Buy. All right, we're gonna get the one with the biggest promo code, which is the Asus Prime, which has $150. But getting back to the fact that this is a mini ITX build, that's the last thing you would definitely want to be considering with mini ITX, how big the graphics card is, not just in terms of the length, but also how many slots it takes up, especially if it's a 3-slot or 4-slot card. That was one of the nice things about the Dan Case A4, as well as the Lian Li variant of the Dan A4, is they still fit really, really big graphics cards. And that's another feature of PCPartPicker down here amongst your potential issues and warnings. When they list cases, they list the dimensions of graphics cards that fit in cases, and then when you add a graphics card in a case, it will compare those and tell you if you're going over that. All right, so with those upgrades, it's closer to a $1,900 build, but that's if you were building it right now. What we're looking at in terms of the actual price of the upgrades would be $550 plus about $250. So that is about an $800 upgrade, but that would be a really nice bump up in terms of core performance. Gaming performance in particular, you're also going from a 6-core to an 8-core processor. And then just like the first build, I would say if you're looking to upgrade other things, your memory is something that you could also maybe add more to. Or since you're mini ITX, or for anyone who's upgrading memory in general, it's best to remove your dual channel kit and then replace it entirely with an upgraded kit, like a 2x32 gig kit, for example. But that would be another way to get yourself a little bit more performance out of your system, but would mostly affect non-gaming things or doing things like gaming and streaming or game capture at the same time. But that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Build Fix. A huge thank you to PCPartPicker for sponsoring this series, as well as all of you who posted replies to my community post that I put up last month. Stay tuned for next month. I'll be doing this yet again. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Hit the thumbs up button on this video if you enjoyed it. Check out my store at paulshardware.net, where you can buy shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and lots of other high quality merchandise. Thank you guys once again for watching. We'll see you all in the next video.